Jennette McCurdy's debut novel, Half His Age, has sparked a lot of controversy and passionate conversations. McCurdy showed with her memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died, which had a cover of her smiling with an urn, that she is a master of shock value. That's not to say her memoir is just shock value. I loved I'm Glad My Mom Died. I found McCurdy a very skilled, insightful, and funny writer. And I was very excited for Half His Age. I had pre-ordered it from my favorite Dublin bookshop, Books Upstairs. And when it arrived on that fateful day, January 20th, I tore through it start to finish that very day. But after I finished, I felt conflicted. It was a compelling read, but I was left wanting more. I watched interviews with Jennette McCurdy, I read reviews, but they only confused me. The press talking points felt disconnected from what I read. Interview after interview stressed that this is a novel about female rage. It is about desire, sex, and power in age gap relationships.
Female rage is a huge theme in the book. Rage is another one.
An exploration of female rage. Heaven forbid a woman feel rage.
Female rage.
Exploration of female rage and power and desire. I'm really interested in themes of desire and power and the things that we desire being confused with some form of power. I think, sex being the most prominent example.
Jennette McCurdy has discussed her own experience in an age gap relationship, which is also detailed in her memoir.
My first relationship was with somebody who was in his mid-30s and I was 18.
What do you remember about how you felt about the age gap?
Thinking that I was mature, thinking that I was so smart that this could happen. And also, I hadn't really felt a deep connection with anybody my age at that point yet.
But Half His Age isn't just an age gap relationship. It's the illegal grooming of a 17-year-old by her English teacher. To explore power and sexual desire in age gap relationships, why use a 17-year-old student and her teacher as the vehicle to do so? Jennette McCurdy said that this is a character study, but why did I come away feeling like I barely knew any of the characters? Where is the female rage that she keeps bringing up in interviews? And my biggest question of all, does Half His Age rely too much on the very shock value that I praised from her memoir? This book may explore taboos, but I don't feel challenged by it. I feel confused. I don't necessarily dislike the book, but I feel like it wasn't successful in its aims. So I want to go through the novel in detail. Warning, there's obviously going to be a lot of spoilers, also content warning for student-teacher relationships, grooming, and descriptions of sex, as graphic as YouTube will allow. We'll be breaking down the novel, the marketing, some literary comparisons, and McCurdy's writing style. Take all of this with a grain of salt. These are just my opinions. I haven't written a novel yet. Half His Age was controversial before it had even hit the shelves. The announcement was met with outrage when people found out that it is a student-teacher relationship. It's called Half His Age, and of course, it has a very salacious cover.
From the cover, you grab people, right? You're up close. There's this teenage mouth, with her finger in her mouth. There's a sexualization to it that I think may cause some controversy once people are actually able to read the book.
This happened before with almost the exact same situation. My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell explores very similar themes. It was the subject of a lot of public outrage, but not only just because of its controversial subject matter, it was also embroiled in a plagiarism accusation scandal that forced the author to come out and say that it was based on her own experiences. Anyways, that's a whole different story. I think people were a bit too quick to jump the gun here. You can write about problematic subject matter without it being problematic itself. Like, this was not packaged as a romance novel. It is not an Arya and Ezra happily ever after. And how people were labeling this an endorsement of grooming before they'd even read it, I don't know. It's important to actually engage with the media that we're going to criticize, which is exactly what we're doing here. I have read Half His Age twice, front to back. Obviously the day it came out, and then I came back to it after doing some research. And I've also spent a lot of time with it, combing through it for quotes and extracts and stuff. So I feel like I know this novel very deeply. So let me tell you about it. Half His Age follows Waldo, a 17-year-old in her last year of high school. The novel is entirely from her point of view, and it's written in present tense, so Waldo is narrating things as they unfold. There's no hindsight, reflection, or anything. It's just in the moment. It's written with very sparse prose, very kind of matter-of-fact language. There's not a lot of flowery descriptions, or I would argue emotion, but we'll get to that when we get there. The novel opens with a sex scene. The very first line is, "It's bad form to groan when a guy's going down on you. I know that. But right now, it's hard not to." The opening scene establishes Waldo's disillusionment with boys her own age and her sexual dissatisfaction. Their inexperience results in mechanical and passionless sex, and she describes a guy mashing and squishing her boobs between his fingers like a kid with a ball of Play-Doh. Right off the bat, teenage boys are undesirable. They're clumsy, they're childlike, they're inexperienced, and I really liked this opening. It's very in your face, but I think it sets up Waldo's attitudes and establishes why she wants an older man. Waldo says, "She settled for pleasure when I wanted connection, having short-lived, shallow sexual relationships with pretty boys." And it doesn't seem like she has any deep or meaningful relationships. Her parents are absent or neglectful, and she only has one friend, Franny, who's a Mormon from a wealthy family. Her mother is never named, only called Mom, and her father pretty much just isn't in the picture. And Waldo's mom has really shaped her attitude to men and her body. Waldo's mom has relationships with a string of different men, and her attention focuses on whatever man is currently taking her fancy, so she spends all her time not working with them, often leaving Waldo home alone. She leaves sticky notes as a substitute for real communication and basically spends no time with her daughter. She's always encouraged Waldo to appeal to the male gaze. Beauty is framed as the vehicle to love. She says, "Best way to keep a man is to be as pretty as you can be." Waldo comes from a poor background. Her family used to live in a trailer park, now an apartment, and other kids called her white trash in school for wearing the same shirt 3 days in a row. She mostly eats reheated ready meals or junk food, and when we meet Waldo, she's very dissatisfied with her life and apathetic about the future. She goes to school, goes to work, and occasionally hangs out with Franny. Waldo works in Victoria's Secret, the epitome of the very female objectification that her mother endorses. We don't ever get a sense of what Waldo's interested in, what she dreams about doing, if she has ever wanted to leave her hometown of Anchorage, Alaska. McCurdy set this in Alaska because that's where her partner's from, and she says she spent a lot of time there. But to me, the setting felt like it could be any US state, except for like a handful of descriptions about Alaska. I expected Anchorage to represent or evoke Waldo's social isolation, or for it to feel suffocating, constricting, reflect Waldo's limited options. But the setting didn't really do anything. Waldo is in school or working in a rundown mall, and she goes to an Alaskan resort at some point, but most of that trip is just descriptions of her and the teacher having sex and having conversations, with a couple of remarks about skiers and the mountains, and I really didn't get a strong sense of place from the novel. I didn't come away from this novel feeling like I knew anything about Alaska that I didn't already, or that I had some sense of what it felt like to be there. One of the few references to Alaska is, "It's the middle of October, my favorite time of year in Alaska. The days aren't so short that they're depressing or so long that they're never ending. An appropriate amount of day." That doesn't really give me anything. Waldo meets Mr. Corgi, the teacher with whom she'll have a relationship, 8 pages into the novel. Technically, it's page 11, but the first page is page 3, so it's 8 pages into the novel. I know I've taken a little while to set things up, so it might not feel super fast, but the chapters are so short that it feels very sudden. The start of chapter 3, we meet Corgi, and then from then on, it's about Waldo and Corgi. I wish we had spent more time with Waldo before this, getting to know her. I wish, we had established some sense of normalcy that had been disrupted by Corgi's entrance, a stronger sense of life before and after Corgi. But his first words are, "I'm a failure, an absolute failure." He wanted to be a writer, but here he is, a 40-something-year-old high school English teacher. Waldo's obsession and attraction is immediate. It is insta-love. Quote, "My attraction to Corgi is instant. So sudden, it's alarming." Yeah, by the second class, she's fantasizing about sleeping with him, and after the third, she goes to the bathroom and touches herself to pictures from his Instagram. I didn't really understand Waldo's attraction to Corgi. She describes his looks as faded, he's atrophied, and she says, "The guys I've hooked up with are all nice to look at, and yet what I feel toward Mr. Corgi is more intense than anything I felt toward any of them. I don't know why he's desirable, now or at any point in the novel." Waldo's V pulses at his authenticity, at his honesty, so part of me wonders if it's the only person that she feels like is not performing, but then that is inconsistent with her opinions later on, so that still kind of leaves me wondering, is it just sexual attraction? I don't know. I think it is supposed to be some kind of animal, unexplainable lust attraction, but I don't understand the motivation behind the novel-long relationship. I understand Waldo's loneliness and wanting inside her, but I don't know why she's pulled to Mr. Corgi. After she reads out her poetry homework one class, she says, "He's impressed. He likes me. He sees me." Is this why she likes him? Does she feel seen by him? The background of feeling like an outsider, of being neglected by her mom, makes me think this, but this is all just like speculation. And it's not like a satisfying kind of, oh, you know, these things are left unanswered. It's like, we're going to be reading about this relationship and this obsession for an entire novel. And I have no sense of why she likes this man. And I've talked to a couple other people who've also read it, and they've said the same thing. After I read Half His Age the first time, I went and I read My Dark Vanessa, which was a book that I owned but had never read. And this is about a 15-year-old girl who is groomed by her English teacher. This novel, Half His Age, Mr. Fitz, aka Ezra from Pretty Little Liars, it's always an English teacher. It's always an English teacher who's doing the grooming. This is kind of a tangent, but I wonder if it's because, like, I feel like we all may have a weird relationship with some English teacher. You become a lot more personal with them, and also, you know, these men who are in the arts seem a lot more sensitive. But it's just interesting. It's always an English teacher. Anyway, because they deal with such similar subject matter, you can't help but compare the two. And I found My Dark Vanessa to be far superior in its exploration of the themes. I just also thought it was a better book overall. I thought the writing was a lot better. And this is split into two narratives. One is during the grooming period of Vanessa as a teenager, and then her as an adult in her 30s around the time of the Me Too movement. And it is really excellent. We get the kind of reflection that we don't get in Half His Age. The grooming happens a lot more slowly. We see a lot of seeds kind of planted, a lot more psychological manipulation. I think this book is more successful in setting up the infatuation. We see Vanessa go to class and then kind of think about a compliment or a remark from the teacher for days after, her kind of overanalyzing all these little details, and the teacher makes the main character feel special. He appeals to her sense of being an outsider, and it's just so much better. I'm sorry to say it. They're different books. It's not that two authors cannot write about the same subject matter, obviously, but I think that this novel is a much more in-depth and successful exploration of power. It's much more overt and explicit in exploring the grooming aspect. We don't really look at that in Half His Age at all. Jennette McCurdy said time and time again that she didn't want this to be a moralistic tale. She didn't want this to be a black and white tale of victim and abuser.
It's more so, I think, that she doesn't want herself to be looked at as a victim. The entire book is told through the 17-year-old's point of view, Waldo, and she thinks that that would be other people coming at her from a position of superiority and viewing her as the inferior person. So she wants to be perceived as an equal. I do try to avoid I definitely try to avoid moralistic writing, anything finger waggy. I don't think that has any chance of resonating. And sort of being stuck in those victim villain narratives. I do try to write each character as believing that they're making the right choice.
She doesn't really mention grooming in interviews at all. She talks about age gap relationships a lot more. We'll continue this thread as we go along, but I just really feel like if she wanted to explore the themes of sex, power, desire, etc. in age gap relationships, don't set up this impossible hurdle of like an illegal grooming situation because you can't really get past that. We don't know why, but Waldo is infatuated with Corgi, and Waldo follows her mom's blueprint to dress up and appeal herself to Mr. Corgi. She does a skincare and morning routine that seems ripped right out of the like morning shed TikTok hashtag. Waldo describes scrubbing and shaving her body, straightening her hair, quote, always doing something to stop my body from doing what it wants to do. And the novel will be a journey of Waldo listening to her body and following what her body wants to do. So this is an interesting kind of setup. Waldo is a parentified child. She's managed and juggled her mom's emotions since I think she says the age of 5. And obviously it's impossible not to compare the dysfunctional mother-daughter relationship that is present in this novel to Jennette McCurdy's own relationship with her mother. Obviously they're not the same person, but you can tell that McCurdy has pulled on a lot of her personal experience to write this novel in terms of her mother, in terms of the age gap relationship. Her mother's neglect has made Waldo internalize this idea that she's hard to love, that she wants too much. She has this void that she attempts to fill up by buying things. Waldo constantly doom scrolls and has online shopping sprees. She fills up carts at Sephora and Shein to fill this hole inside of her. Tab, 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 add to cart, add to cart, add to cart, add to cart. And this brings us to the money aspect. As we know, Waldo is from a poor background. She works part-time at Victoria's Secret. On page 17, she spends $100 out of her $197 bank balance on Forever 21 clothes. Then, 30 pages later, she spends $114 in Target on beauty items. She says, the total was a whopping $114 that my Victoria's Secret salary can't afford, but that I justified as some reasonable price point for investing in myself. I was a little confused by Waldo's repeated spending and splurging because it doesn't seem to go anywhere. There are a lot of actions and no consequences to her spending. And I would say actions, no consequences is actually kind of a theme of the novel. Waldo describes compulsively shopping, spending all her money, and there are a couple of references to her returning things that she's not happy with, but she spends a lot of money. And there's no climax to any credit card debt, any unpaid bills, anything. Waldo complains that she's in charge of all the bills. She is the responsible adult in the house, and I thought that this might lead to maybe some conflict with her mom, maybe a blow up where, you know, the water or the electricity gets turned off and it sparks kind of some conflict or fight or peak of emotion of some sort between Waldo and her mother, or some kind of frustration that she's been this responsible adult for so long. But there's nothing. The constant spending is just a character device to show, you know, her hollowness, her wanting, but without any stakes, that device is also just hollow. Mr. Corgi keeps Waldo after class one day to praise her writing, and he tells her that she has a voice. And Waldo says, I can't tell him that the only reason I've taken an interest in writing is because I've taken an interest in him. That he is the goal, the objective, that writing is just a means to an end, a chance to impress him, or better, to connect with him. I thought this would maybe turn out to be untrue over the novel. It really feels like something that a teenager says to kind of shrug off any display of enthusiasm or passion because, you know, that's cringe. But it seems to just be true. Or at least there's no evidence to the contrary. I would have enjoyed seeing a passion emerge for something that's not Corgi. And this is what I mean when I said earlier that we don't know anything about what she's interested in besides Corgi. I understand that this is a novel about obsession, but there is no sense of what is lost or discarded in this obsession. So it doesn't have an impact because we don't know Waldo. Since Jennette McCurdy mentions female rage in every interview, let's look at how that pops up in the novel. Waldo becomes enraged when Franny suggests that Mr. Corgi only praised her writing because she has a sad life and that her writing is harrowing. She says, I'm speed walking through the hallways, a rage boiling in me that scares me, that's bigger than me, that controls me, that takes me over and leads me to do things I later regret. I know anger. I can handle anger when it's at a 7 or an 8 or a 9, and I can buy my way down to a 4 or click my way to a 5. But rage is a 10. Rage is a burning, seething 10 that annihilates me. It's not the most subtle, but okay. And then Corgi says, well, harrowing writing doesn't mean that it's good, and no, Waldo, I don't pity you. And she says, he took my unmovable rage and made it pliable, dissolved it into something tender. The first excerpt I read is here, her seething, boiling rage. By here it's gone. McCurdy says that this is a novel about female rage, but I don't feel that. There aren't intense peaks of anger or emotional outbursts. Waldo seems much more numb and hollow than angry. And I understand that anger can make you feel numb and hollow, especially when it's repressed, but I wouldn't say that I feel rage from her. The manic cycles of shopping and sex, of Waldo trying to fill a void, they feel to me more like this kind of desperate sadness and loneliness than rage. When I think of rage, when I think of the kind of female rage genre or media, I think of explosive destruction, of violence, rampage, rebellion, especially women rebelling against beauty standards. I think of the scene in Mean Girls where Regina George finally snaps and she is screaming and taking out the burn book and calling herself a fugly slut. This novel didn't feel like that. Rage can look different, I understand, but I think the kind of term female rage is something that's become a bit of a marketing tactic, good for her cinematic universe or the female rage genre. And when you market your book like that, it comes with some kind of expectations, and my expectations are not met. Maybe you'll disagree. The section with Corgi also brings up something about McCurdy's style that I want to discuss. You know, the phrase, he took this thing that controls me and he controlled it. He is the secret, the key, the answer. These damn triads. There's this pattern of X is adjective, synonym. And I came to really dislike McCurdy's style because it feels so repetitive and redundant. Another example is, then our relationship might actually be real. Until then, it's just a theory, a suggestion, an idea. There's some more examples peppered throughout the rest of the video, but once I noticed it, I found it so distracting and pointless. This technique is useful for emphasis when used sparingly, but the overuse just made everything feel of equal weight, which is completely against the point. If you're stressing every point, nothing feels stressed. You know what I mean? On page 45, Corgi goes to Victoria's Secret and he meets Waldo and he invites her to dinner with his wife at his house. They have a child, Gregory, who is mentioned like a handful of times and is of no significance or importance whatsoever, either to the novel or to Corgi, it seems. But not in this kind of like, oh, he's like a deadbeat dad kind of way. It's more like a, whenever he pops up, I'm like, oh, I forgot he existed. I don't really understand the point of him as a character. Anyways, he doesn't bring any like stakes to it. When Waldo's getting ready to go to dinner at the Corgi house, here and like throughout the novel, we get these almost montages of Waldo that feel like McCurdy transcribed like a TikTok beauty routine or is mimicking that like famous Cassie Euphoria scene. McCurdy does a good job of conveying the kind of manic rush to become beautiful and that kind of hope that if you just do enough beauty hacks that you will magically feel like a different person, and the disappointment that you inevitably set yourself up for. McCurdy has also said in interviews that she's a very sensory person, someone who's very much like in their body, and I think that comes across in the writing. Like, I think that she does a good job of making you feel the kind of sensory experience. I shampoo my scalp aggressively enough to wash off my sins, then smear a handful of goopy conditioner onto my hair, comb through it and clip my hair in place with a cloth to let the conditioner seep in. I scoop a dollop of sugar scrub onto my legs and scrape it into every pore. There can never be too much scraping, too much sloughing off of a woman's body. What is a woman really, if not silky, if not smooth, if not supple, perky, and poreless? I rinse out the conditioner and squirt the shaving cream onto my right leg and then my left. I drag the razor with surgical precision, as if it's my duty, my life's work. This shaved leg, my magnum opus. After the shower, I smear in the lip sleepy mask and rub in mounds of body butter. I dab concealer on my inflamed spots, spread one pump of lightweight foundation across my face. I blow dry my hair and use a round brush on the tips so they don't poke out. I started to kind of abbreviate towards the end there, but I think you get a good sense of it. And then at the end, she says, I am as close to godly as I can be. I am pure, I am lovable, I am exhausted. I think as you can see here, the general writing style that McCurdy goes for, the novel is very much a description of character actions without a lot of interiority, reflection, or emotion. It's written in the present tense, as I said, and one of my friends read it and said that she felt like she was reading a screenplay, which I actually think is really apt. It almost feels as well like it could be like a plot summary. Like this is the Wikipedia article detailing the scene rather than the actual excerpt from the novel. I understand that McCurdy has an aversion to flowery prose, but I think that the novel is so pared back and matter of fact that it doesn't feel emotional. And you can have evocative, sparse, or matter-of-fact prose, but unfortunately, this is not the case. Corgi's wife, Gwen, is beautiful, waif-like. She clearly comes from money. She is the dominant partner, and Waldo is seeing Corgi subdued for the first time. Reading I'm Glad My Mom Died, I thought that Jennette McCurdy expertly inhabited different voices to represent different times of her life. She did a good balance of kind of giving you a sense of what it felt like in real time as a child, as a teenager, with what was going on, and reflecting on it simultaneously. That was something that really stuck with me, and when I heard that this novel was going to be from the perspective of a teenager, I was like, oh great, I feel like McCurdy did that really well before. But again, I don't think that's the case. McCurdy describes Waldo in interviews as intelligent and insightful, kind of wise beyond her years, not just the cliche that older men use to groom young women, but genuinely. I do agree that she's intelligent, but sometimes she feels a bit too intelligent, a bit too wise or mature. The novel at times felt like reflection. It felt like she was describing these scenes with hindsight, but it is just present tense and it's in the moment. There is no reflection, so it's kind of confusing. There are these like tired, weary, jaded insights that sound like they're from a much older person, but they come from a 17-year-old. She has these observations and insights, but we don't know any of the life experience that could have informed them. So, for example, Waldo describes how Corgi and Gwen's conversation at the dinner table, and she says that they feel kind of performative, that they feel like these well-rehearsed anecdotes from a boring married couple. It was our third date, Gwen says, puckering her lips as she launches into a story she's clearly excited to tell. Teddy tried cooking for me, sweet thing that he is. He was trying to make, oh, what was it you were trying to make, Teddy? Chicken piccata, that's what it was, she says, snapping her fingers as if she didn't know, but I have a feeling that she did, that this is one of their most heavily rotated stories, the kind that every couple collects after they've been together for a while, the kind that can carry them through social gatherings without either of them having to do the grunt work of reflection, or forming a new opinion, or really seeing each other. Instead, they just pop a coin in the jukebox and let it rip. One of their stories, the lines rehearsed, the beats memorized, even the shared glances a part of the act. Waldo hasn't been around a lot of married couples or couples in general. Her mother has had a string of unstable relationships. So I don't believe that a 17-year-old from this kind of background would think this. I don't know where or when she would have observed enough long-term couples to kind of see this pattern play out. Insights like this would have benefited from some context, like Waldo saying, Tristan and Franny do this all the time, and so I recognize the kind of well-rehearsed jukebox formula, whatever. Or talk about Franny's parents and the Mormons that she'd been around, or customers in Victoria's Secret, but we don't get any of that. We don't know any of the experience that formed these insights, so they just don't make sense. It's important to translate the experience into the observation. I'm not saying that teenagers can't or don't have astute social observations, but I'm saying that I don't believe that this teenager would observe the things that she's observing. At dinner, Waldo, not so subtly, signals to Corgi that she has a crush on him, and she sends him an email after dinner with her phone number, and he calls her on Thanksgiving, which she's spending with Franny and her family. Corgi is a couple whiskeys deep, and Corgi and Waldo bond over their love of writing. Corgi has this half-finished dystopian novel. I've been rewatching New Girl, and this really reminds me of Nick Miller and how he has his zombie novel.
This is The worst thing I have ever read in my entire life.
Z is for zombie?
Yeah, Z is for zombie novel.
But don't get it twisted, Corgi definitely isn't as charming or as lovable as Nick Miller. On the phone, Waldo suggests that they meet up, and Corgi shuts things down. But the next day, while she's working, Corgi texts her and asks if she still wants to go for a walk. On that walk, Waldo kisses Corgi, and he rejects her and firmly puts a boundary in place, saying that nobody can find out about it because he'd be fired. She says, "I came on to you." He says, "It doesn't matter. I should have seen this coming. I'm more than twice your age and I'm your teacher. I shouldn't have invited you to dinner. I shouldn't have gone on the walk. I shouldn't have engaged at all." And even though Waldo is technically the instigator physically, obviously Corgi knows he's been crossing lines and setting up an inappropriate dynamic. Waldo's mom has been seeing a man called Tony, and Waldo finally meets him. And there was a detail that I really loved where her mom says, "Tony, this is my daughter Waldo," she says, laughing nervously. "I've told her so much about you." And I love this detail of "I've told her so much about you," not "I've told Tony so much about my daughter." It's a tiny detail, but it shows where her priorities are. We get more female rage slash frenzied getting ready when Waldo gets ready for school, thinking that she's going to see Corgi, and she says, "Rage that I was born with dark circles that made me look sick, and rosacea that bursts when I'd least like it to, and thick, chunky curls that won't behave. Curls with 4 different curl patterns, because I guess it's not enough that I have unruly hair. I need 4 different patterns of unruly hair that don't go together, 2 of which aren't even tight enough to be classified as curly, but not loose enough to be classified as waves, and are probably most aptly classified as some kind of pasta noodle. Just weird, non-committal hair that looks like a horrible accident every time I wake up. Rage that he doesn't want me, or that maybe he would if I didn't have dark circles, or rosacea, or acne, or curls." McCurdy labels the feeling, but I don't feel it. If that makes sense. Like, I think because her writing is so sparse and snappy and it just describes actions, it just pushes the plot forward, pushes the action forward without allowing for any reflection or for any kind of emotion to develop. I want to see the frustration play out. I want to see Waldo trying to drag a brush through her hair and the bristles break off, or she rips off some of her hair, or she throws the brush at something and breaks a mirror. Something like a peak of some emotion, not just saying, "I feel rage," Corgi disappears for a couple weeks, and Waldo goes to the winter formal, and she's been yearning. So she sneaks off to Corgi's classroom, hoping that it will smell like him, which it doesn't. So then she leans down to smell the seat of his chair. And at that very moment, Waldo, his silhouette looms in the doorway. He steps forward and lets the door shut behind him. I can't breathe. I can't think. I can't move. If I got caught like this, I would get in my car, drive until I couldn't anymore, I would change my name, and I would never look back. But Waldo isn't even embarrassed. She hugs Corgi after learning that his father has passed, and that's why he's been away, and she says that she feels him grow. So this then becomes their first sexual encounter, and it's really bizarre. Waldo basically grinds / dry humps Corgi until he finishes, and he says no repeatedly. He keeps saying, we can't. I didn't know how to read the scene because it's so sparsely described. Is it supposed to be him kind of succumbing to desire with these insincere objections? Or is it a violation? Either way, it made me feel icky. A couple days later, they meet in a cafe, and Corgi admits that he has feelings for her, but that they can't be together because obviously she's 17 and he's her teacher, and she protests. She says, "What in my life is age appropriate? I bought my car, my laptop, my clothes, my gas. I pay the electric bill. I do the laundry and the dishes and the vacuuming. I've been managing my mom's emotions since I was 5. I don't spend my days worrying about what house party I'm going to get wasted at. I worry if water's going to come out of the faucet next time I turn it on." Literally the next page, she goes on a shopping spree. And this, again, is what I said about the money, where I'm we're told that she has money problems, but then we never see her actually struggling with money in a real-time way. She buys a wallet from Kors, a Dior foundation, a mini honey hair oil, a milk makeup lip and cheek, and a hand cream at the checkout counter of Sephora. Then she buys a pair of checkered Vans in Macy's, an LA Dodgers hat, an off-the-shoulder top, and a 4-piece travel makeup bag in Victoria's Secret. Where is this money coming from? How does she still have money? This is definitely like hundreds of dollars worth of things that she's buying. And she works part-time at Victoria's Secret and said that she has to pay the groceries and the bills. So I don't understand. I don't mind the like unrealistic or unexplained spending so much as the lack of consequences. None of this manic shopping builds any tension or comes to a head at any point. Like there's no mention of debt or unpaid bills. And also it'd be fine if it happened like once, maybe twice, but the like shopping sprees are such a constant theme of the novel, so it's just like impossible to ignore this like money aspect of everything. Corgi comes over drunk and they have sex on Waldo's bed with no protection. No protection's not mentioned. Protection or birth control aren't mentioned at any point in the novel, I'm pretty sure. And that's like not foreshadowing that something's gonna happen, because again, as we said, none of these actions have any consequences. Anyways, the sex is described, like everything else, very matter of fact. It just describes actions more than sensations. And I can't really quote it, unfortunately. But she does say at one point, he is quite literally my brains out. All my stupid anxieties and cyclical thoughts, my woes and insecurities, my open tabs and fast fashion carts, gone and replaced with this. I'm alive. Finally. This felt like such a moment that warrants the advice, show, don't tell. I just really wish that Jennette McCurdy trusted the reader. Another instance of this is when Waldo is in Corgi's car. The inside of Mr. Corgi's car isn't what I expected. I figured there'd be copies of plays at the foot of the passenger seat, lined notebooks with hurried thoughts scribbled throughout, too important to not write down. Instead, there are crayon marks on the seats, Cheerio grinds in between the cushions, colorful plastic toys with greasy handprints on them. This car isn't a vivid representation of a vibrant artist, but of a tired dad. Really didn't need that last sentence. I got that. But what I don't get is how Waldo feels about this. Is she disappointed? Does she feel closer to him now that she's seen like this glimpse of a different side of him? Does she like what she sees? Does she dislike it? I don't know. Gwen is spending Christmas Eve with her parents, and I guess their child, Gregory, is there too, but he's not mentioned. Corgi and Waldo go away to Alaskan Resort, a hotel in the mountains. They've had sex once, and now they're going on a weekend away together. Okay. Their communication in between has just been some like texting. The pacing feels really rushed, but it doesn't feel like this kind of intentional like whirlwind romance kind of pacing. It just feels like this happened, then this happened, then this happened. I don't know, the sense of time feels really weird. It's just like there's no kind of description of weather or what she's wearing. It's just like, it's Christmas, it's Thanksgiving, it's New Year's. I know it's not that order, but you know what I mean. All that happens is basically they have sex and they people watch, and that's kind of it. And on the drive back, Corgi is playing music from his teens, obviously a sign that his relationship with Waldo is an attempt to feel young again, to kind of like reclaim some sense of adolescence. Like, despite Waldo's admiration of him, he's framed as pretty pathetic. Waldo tells Corgi about her favorite Christmases growing up, which were in the trailer park. She says how it sounds sad just because of the words trailer park, but how it was actually pretty great. How every family would make a different dish and we'd all bring them out to a long fold-out plastic table and make a big buffet of it. Roast and ham and chicken, candied yams and green bean casserole and stuffing and pumpkin pie, and store-brand canned crescent rolls that we'd stuff with marshmallows and sprinkle with cinnamon sugar. We'd sit in lawn chairs around the fire, wearing our warmest coats, our breath white in the cold air, and we'd sing Christmas carols or listen to one of the adults read us The Grinch or The Gift of the Magi, or The Night Before Christmas. Don't see anybody in the fancy zip codes with community like this, Mom would say, and I'd nod in agreement. There was another moment from Thanksgiving that was similar. She says, we talk about our favorite Thanksgivings. I'd tell him about the time Mom kept complaining the chicken was taking forever to cook and then realized the oven was broken. She called the landlord over and over again, but he wasn't answering. Then he finally did and said with the holiday he couldn't come out for a couple days. And suddenly Mom was quiet, calm even, serene, another trio. She knew there was no chance we were having that roast chicken, so there was no use trying. In that moment, she made giving up look like a good thing. We made a sheet for it and ate peanut butter and banana sandwiches until our stomachs ached. It was a great night. I really liked moments like this, seeing the positive sides of Waldo's relationship with her mom and help us understand them more and why Waldo holds out hope for her mom to change. It shows how money and gifts didn't make the holidays, but community and family did. I wish there were more reflective moments of Waldo's memories to like contrast Waldo's current state, to give us a sense of what she wants, what she misses, and what made her happy once upon a time. Like I said earlier, I think the novel would have hugely benefited from Corgi being introduced later so that we could see things like this. Corgi and Waldo have frenzied and passionate sex whenever he can sneak over to her house, and there are a lot of sex scenes. That's part of the reason why the novel is controversial, because there are so many graphic scenes between a 17-year-old and a teacher. And with the sex scenes, I thought that McCurdy did a good job of telling us what was happening without trying to like arouse the reader, without trying to make it feel sexy or romantic, if that makes sense. Like, I think the matter-of-fact prose really worked for this. In one scene, Waldo describes the sensation of Cheerio crumbs pressing into her knees from the seat of Corgi's car, and I loved that. I thought it kept the scenes really like grounded. There was a degree of shock there that kept the reader at a distance. And yeah, I never felt like they were supposed to be like titillating. But then I watched the interview with Drew Barrymore and it made me really uncomfortable.
The way that you write about sex it's such a turn on. And I don't feel like I read women writing about women the way you mastercraftly did it.
But I did want there to be aspects of it that were sexy and that did turn people on in a way, because it's also, you know, complicated subject matter. And I don't think doing complicated subject matter in a way that's heavy-handed is going to be readable for anyone.
And I think it shows how disconnected the press tour is from the book. All of the sex scenes are from the point of view of a 17-year-old, and she's having sex with her teacher for the vast majority of them. I then find it odd to describe these scenes as sexy or to frame it like, if you read this novel, you're gonna feel alive. You know, like, I thought the point of these were to make the reader uncomfortable. Emphasizes to me that this novel is more of an age gap novel than this kind of grooming novel in her mind. And I know that she doesn't want it to be like a moralistic tale, but you still have to be conscious of what you're writing. I'm not saying that anyone can't write about student-teacher relationships because they're illegal or immoral, but if you choose to do so, it should feel intentional and impactful. And I think there is a degree of responsibility that comes with choosing sensitive subject matter. Like, McCurdy talks about how she wants to examine sex and power and desire and the illusion of power from sex, and especially for women, but you can't do that in a teacher-student relationship. It's not the same dynamic as two adults. Waldo is already in a less powerful position. She's already Corgi's subordinate. Waldo is framed and kind of feels in this novel like she's a mistress, not a student. Not just in her own perspective, but in the plot of the novel. There are very few moments of Corgi and Waldo interacting in school after they get together. There's very little attention on school in general. There's not many like scenes of them in it. I keep using the word scenes, but it really does feel like a screenplay, so I don't know what better word to use. There's one moment when Waldo dashes off on her lunch break from Victoria's Secret to meet Corgi in the car park, and they have sex in his car in the middle of the day. I thought that the public hookups, because they often have sex in his car, I thought that they would establish some sense of danger or impending doom, that they would get caught, that he would get arrested or something. But nada. There's one moment when they have sex in Corgi's classroom's cleaning closet, and another teacher almost walks in on them but doesn't. That's like the closest that they get to ever getting caught. Then Waldo turns 18, and for her birthday, her mom gets her a scooter that she wanted 3 years ago. She gets her Sour Patch Kids and mascara. I think it's a great illustration of the gap in their relationship. Her mother doesn't know Waldo, hasn't spent enough time to get to know this now 18-year-old Waldo. All of her gifts are informed by past memories, by her knowledge of a younger Waldo, because she doesn't spend any time with her. And after her mom leaves, Waldo starts to fill up online shopping carts with a bunch of things, quote, desperate to chase away this heavy emptiness. But besides this description of her like frenzied actions, we don't know how she feels. Like, we don't feel the kind of disappointment. We don't know what she actually wanted for her birthday, what she would have liked as a gift, you know? She later meets Corgi and he's reluctant to give her wine because I guess she's too young. even though he is sleeping with her. The bulk of the novel from here on out is basically Waldo and Corgi like navigating their relationship as a secret affair, of Corgi meeting Waldo whenever Gwen is busy. And yes, Waldo is now 18, but they're still teacher-student, even though it doesn't feel like that because we never see them in school together or anything. The only kind of like reminder of this dynamic is that Waldo always calls Corgi Corgi. She never calls him by his first name. She's initially happy to be his mistress, but then Corgi says they need to take a break. And here there's some acknowledgement of the age gap. Corgi says, eventually you're going to resent me and you're going to say I robbed a cradle. This is very similar to the manipulation in My Dark Vanessa. The teacher does a lot of kind of groundwork to convince Vanessa never to tell anyone that they are truly in love, that this is not grooming or abuse or any kind of manipulation, that she has all the power. And again, I think My Dark Vanessa is far superior in this, but we do still see some of the kind of psychological manipulation that is inherent to grooming. Corgi's break devastates Waldo, and she tells Franny about their relationship. Franny calls Corgi an abuser. She says that Waldo has been groomed, and this is the only kind of explicit labeling that we get at any point in the novel. But Waldo manipulates Franny into keeping it a secret. This is the only moment that we have with Franny and Waldo discussing the relationship. I guess it just says that like Waldo is really desperate to talk to someone about it, but it doesn't go anywhere. There's no threat of exposure from this. Waldo and Franny's relationship doesn't change. Nothing happens. Waldo starts dating a guy in her year called Nolan, and Nolan seems really nice. They go on a few dates. She, quote, takes Nolan's quivering virginity under his Star Wars bedsheets. And as Nolan and Waldo were going upstairs to do the do, his parents, quote, share a nervous but accepting parental look. And I really like that detail. Nolan and Waldo go on a double date with Franny and her boyfriend Tristan to a diner, and they split chili cheese fries. If you've read this, you might know what's coming. Corgi and his family are there too, and I thought this might be a good opportunity for some kind of confrontation, especially now that Waldo is upset that they're not seeing each other anymore. But, you know, she also is seeing Gregory. She's seeing Corgi with his family together. I thought maybe it might provoke some guilt or some emotion of seeing his family together, something. But there's nothing. It's just they make eye contact. And then Waldo goes to the bathroom and pleasures herself. She says, I lock myself in a stall and start to text him that I miss him and that I have to see him, and then delete the text and go to his Instagram page and masturbate to it with my chili cheese fingers. The chili burns my vagina. I didn't think this was necessary, but this and a later sex scene very much feel like they are for shock value. McCurdy says that she wants to show sex in all its forms, tender, passionate, ugly, messy, gross, whatever. But details like this just feel like they are purposely trying to make the reader uncomfortable or shocked. Like, I don't really get it. McCurdy said in an interview,
I never write anything for the sake of shock value. It's so important to me to not do that. I try to write from a place of truth. I'm pursuing truth genuinely, and I can't help it if truth is uncomfortable or shocking.
I don't believe her. I don't believe that she's not consciously using shock value, because she herself has said otherwise. In her New York Times profile, which is titled Jennette McCurdy Wants to See You Squirm, she says that she wanted the cover to be really provocative and visceral. I really liked this review from Fran Hopfner for Vulture, who talks about McCurdy's shock value writing. She says, McCurdy shines when she's writing about anything but Corgi. Waldo's undeveloped relationships with her mother and best friend, kind of, Franny, deserve more examination. One of them ignores her and the other smothers her, but these female relationships wind up being the most foundational of any of Waldo's interactions. Corgi, stuck in stereotype and immaturity, holds Waldo back both narratively and emotionally. Their sex scenes are designed to alienate readers, McCurdy repeatedly emphasizing how wrong it all is. But they also eat up a lot of the novel's oxygen, such that shock value starts to become its only value. Later in the novel, she drives to his house and watches from the car as Corgi celebrates his birthday, and she says, I could tell Gwen, or the whole party even. But she doesn't. That would feel like female rage. That would feel like a breakdown or a climax or something of impact happening. For prom, she dresses up the way she knows Corgi likes because she knows that he's chaperoning, and she makes him jealous by kissing Nolan in front of him. At the end of chapter 59, she kisses Nolan and says, "I take a step back and see Mr. Corgi leaning against the wall, arms crossed, lips tight, staring right at me." Next line, start of the next chapter. "I'm so sorry," he says as he pumps into me. Okay. And they're hooking up in the school bathroom. In the school bathroom during prom. No sense of danger. No one catches them. No one comes close. The only consequence of this happening is that Nolan is unhappy that she ditched him and breaks up with her. 2 pages after that, she's graduating. A couple pages later, she says, by June, I guess it's June, sure, things with Corgi have settled back into a groove I know well, the same groove as before. These triplets of synonyms are so annoying. Waldo swings from infatuation to resentment, but I don't really understand what got her there. It's almost funny how no matter how much you're starting to hate someone, you can sit across from them and laugh while you have a nice dinner. Hate? How did we get here? Genuinely, how and when did we get here? They just got back together, and now she's starting to hate him. It's just so sudden. I didn't feel the resentment building up. I know she's jealous of Gwen and everything, but this swing from really wanting to be with him to now resenting him and hating him, it's just too sudden. Out of nowhere, Waldo is on her last straw. And the last straw is... So, Waldo goes to Corgi's, and she's on her period. And while she's still in her car, she takes out her tampon and puts it in the glove box. Right? She goes in, and they start hooking up and having very messy, bloody relations. And in the middle of it, Gwen comes home and almost catches them. So Waldo has to hide naked and bleeding in their closet. And while Gwen is talking to Corgi, Waldo is crouched, cupping her blood and trying to catch it all. I'm not sure exactly what is the breaking point in this for Waldo. Obviously, it's like a humiliating, like disgusting, demeaning situation, but she doesn't say any of that about herself. She doesn't say how she feels. So I don't know why this is like some kind of turning point for her, but she breaks up with Corgi. She says, "I'm not tired. I'm resentful, or I was resentful, but I'm not anymore. It went away. Now I'm just nothing. I'm clear." But you haven't communicated any of that. I know. You have to tell someone when you're upset or when you resent something they're doing so they have an opportunity to fix things. "You saw that I was hurting," I say plainly, "but you pretended you didn't because that would have made your life more difficult, because then you would have actually had to do something about it." The next chapter is all transcribed texts and voicemails. Corgi is desperate, spiraling, and eventually he leaves Gwen. He meets Waldo at a hotel and breaks down sobbing and snotting, basically. And this scene is very similar to an instance from I'm Glad My Mom Died, where a man that Jennette McCurdy was seeing leaves his girlfriend and goes to hers and has, the same kind of sobbing emotional breakdown. I know they're not the same people, but it was impossible to ignore how these are almost exactly the same scene. Waldo and Corgi spend their first night together as adults, I guess, in a proper relationship. Spending more than stolen moments together, Waldo realizes that they actually don't have that much to talk about. By the time we sit down at the Thai place, the conversation slows. They surprise me, the lulls. Not charged, not giddy, not loaded. Another triplet. Just empty lulls that stretch in length and that we both try to hide by studying our menus very intently, discussing food for the second time today. They move to a motel, and the fantasy is slowly dissolving. McCurdy's starts skipping over the sex scenes, just saying, "We had sex," or "We made love in the sheets," blah, blah, blah. She doesn't expand them into like these detailed pages like she did before. It signals that the passion is already dying. The sex is quite literally nothing to write home about. The chapters here are so short. I don't know if you can see, but they're literally less than a page long sometimes. And I don't really know why. Like, I don't understand what the purpose of each chapter is, and I'll read like a chapter and then be like, why was this a chapter? Why did it end here? And why is this completely separate, you know? And sometimes as well, it just feels like it just ends abruptly. It almost ends like in the middle of a scene. It feels, again, like a screenplay, like she's like cutting away to something. Waldo goes to work at Victoria's Secret and then goes home to the motel. Every night, Corgi is working on his great American novel. Waldo then goes home for the first time in weeks. So I guess that's the timeline we're on. It's really, there's no specific references to anything to like, anyway. When she goes home, her mom is there and her mom has cleaned the whole house. She seems more put together and she's noticed that Waldo has been absent, which means that she's been home. She hasn't been at Tony's house or at some other guy's house. So her mom has realized after yet another breakup that she is a sex and love addict. She's been going to meetings, she has a sponsor, and she's determined to change. I don't know how Waldo feels about this. We're not told. I don't know if she's hopeful. I don't know if she believes that she wants to change. I don't know if she doubts it. Does this make her want to be around her mom more? I don't know. We're not told anything. Corgi moves to a small loft, and when he's unboxing his books, he gives Waldo some recommendations. Don Quixote, David Foster Wallace, F. Scott Fitzgerald. He puts up a poster of A Clockwork Orange. There's this kind of wink to the reader that Corgi is recommending all these like kind of quintessentially male stereotypical novels, that he is kind of a narrow-minded man who thinks he's really well-read but has actually only ever engaged with the art of white men. But I don't know how Waldo feels about this. She talks about them watching films together on the Criterion channel or them watching foreign films and not liking the films. But she continues to do so and she still values his opinion. And I also don't really know what she thinks about the book recommendations. Like, again, her fake passion for writing turned out to be fake. We never see her reading. The only insight that we get into Waldo's preferences are when Corgi recommends F. Scott Fitzgerald, he says, "Fitzgerald might be a bit flowery for you. Yeah, he's not for me. What's that saying? The simplest explanation is always the best. Occam's razor." Corgi puffs out his chest like an arrogant schoolboy, proud to know the technical term. "Sure," I nod. "Occam's razor. That's how I feel about writing. I like writing that's simple, plainly stated observations, no fluff. I don't want to hear, 'It was the kind of grey morning with air so frigid that it makes your bones wail like a creaking staircase.' I want to hear, 'It was a cold Tuesday. My bones hurt.' Get to the point, you know?" I swear McCurdy has said this almost verbatim in interviews while discussing her own writing style, and I found it jarring rereading the book after having watched a bunch of interviews, because I read it and I was like, I remember McCurdy saying this exact thing.
I really appreciate and respect writing that is at certain points distanced and a little bit detached and just really plainly stated. I don't need somebody to tell me how to feel. I want to feel.
Yeah.
And I think that comes through most when there's not any sort of finger wagging or overly flowery writing.
Is the novel written in this style because it's Waldo's perspective and it's what Waldo likes, or because it's Jennette McCurdy's preference? You know what I mean? It's kind of bizarre. It almost feels like this moment as well is McCurdy speaking through Waldo and like telling the reader why it's written like this, if that makes sense. I don't know. It's just it's a really bizarre moment that like took me out of it. But Corgi and Waldo have fallen into a rut, a routine that's familiar probably to many couples of just staying in, watching TV and ordering from the same three places. And Waldo is clearly unhappy. Corgi says, "I love that you let me be who I am," he says, looking deep into my soul. I smile, praying he can't see the fear behind my eyes. And the mundanity is crushing, the routinization of domestic life excruciating, a never-ending pile of bland logistics and interchangeable exchanges, each day bleeding into the next, nothing differentiating them. Then why is Waldo with him? Why? What is keeping her there? And what provoked this fear? Where is this fear coming from? She talks about coming home to an unhappy, drunk Corgi and them fighting. She says, "The fight before the fight, the thing that isn't really the thing, but that is a thing, a smaller thing, a more manageable thing, a thing that we can both agree to disagree on and talk in circles about for the time being until the braver one of us is able to say the realer, uglier thing." Now I don't understand when they started fighting and what they're fighting about, really, in general. You know, besides this one insight that we see where they're fighting about Corgi wants Waldo to have some plan for the future, to pursue her passions, and she doesn't. I also like how much time has passed. How much time has passed? Anyway, to make it up to her, a few days later, Corgi plans a surprise trip to Hawaii for the two of them. So here we are. Here is Corgi planning the surprise trip. They're in the airport at the gate waiting to board. Next page, she goes to the bathroom and decides that she is done with Corgi and she leaves. Next page, she goes home, finds her mom in bed with Tony, and she just turns around and closes the door. And then we're on our last page. Final chapter, final paragraphs. My hand's out the window like a singer in a 90s music video. I yank my hair tie out and let my curls blow in the wind. I'm halfway to Seward, a dozen calls deep from Corgi and 6 from Mom when I finally shut off my phone. Maybe it's all the same. Corgi and pants and YouTube and makeup and sweaters and junk food and sex. Maybe they're all just distractions from me. But right now, me feels okay. No chaos, no turmoil, no endless list of wants. Right now, I don't want for anything. The end. This pacing is ridiculous. This ending felt so rushed. And overall, I really wanted to see more of how the dynamic changed once Waldo turned 18, once she graduated and was no longer his student, but nothing really changed. Their relationship felt similar in and out of school. There was never any tension about exposure. They never got exposed. There were just never any consequences to anything. I ended this novel thinking, do any of these characters change? On the last page, Waldo says, I don't want anything anymore. Okay, sure. She's not online shopping. She's happy. Okay. But there were literally just no consequences to anything. Gwen and Gregory barely feature. We barely know anything about her best friend, Franny. Nothing ever happened with the school, with their relationship. It's just like nothing. And listen, I love a character-driven novel. If I read a good book where it's character-driven and not much happens, but I feel like I really know the characters, I feel like I really get a sense of the world and the setting and everything, then I really enjoy it. But this, despite Jennette McCurdy saying it's a character study, it doesn't feel like that. Because as I've said time and time again, I don't feel like I know Waldo. I don't feel like I know any of the characters. It's also not like good enough plot-wise that it can just be a plot novel. You know what I mean? McCurdy is so against making this a moralistic tale that it's just nothing. The pendulum is swung in the other direction somehow, and there's like no exploration of immorality. It barely feels like a teacher-student relationship. It's so bizarre. And she said in interviews,
This novel is less focused on the taboo itself and more so on the psychological examination of a young woman who falls into this situation and all of the contributing factors that lead her to enter into this kind of situation in the first place.
That's just not... It's not really what I got. You can tell a story of trauma or abuse or grooming, whatever, without it feeling didactic, without it feeling really moralistic. Like I said, My Dark Vanessa is fantastic at this. It paints an amazing portrait of abuse and of denial, and it engages with the Me Too movement in really interesting ways as well. It details this kind of decades-long healing journey from the protagonist, of her realizing everything that's happened to her. And it feels like natural development. I don't think we needed to see like Waldo kind of come to terms with anything and say, I was groomed, or I don't think we necessarily need to just see Corgi get caught or anything like that. But the relationship felt so like insular and repetitive that it was just not interesting. Ultimately, I don't dislike this novel because it's about controversial subject matter. I dislike it because I feel like it doesn't say anything. It's such a contrast to McCurdy's memoir, which felt so powerful and insightful and intense and comprehensive. It felt like she had so much to say, which is why I find this book so frustrating. Like, I know McCurdy is smart and talented, and I really like her as a person. I have so much respect for her. And I think that's just part of the reason why I'm so disappointed as well. She said that she is adapting Half His Age into a screenplay, and I think that might just be better. I mean, maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I think given her writing style, maybe screenwriting is just a better avenue for her than writing prose. I've said a lot. It's been a long video. I've had a lot of thoughts, but now I would love to hear yours. Let me know if you've read Half His Age or not, and what you thought about it, how you feel. I'll be in the comments. I'll be reading them, and I'm excited. Like, subscribe if you haven't already, and please consider supporting the channel on Patreon. I do monthly media roundups of everything that I've watched, read, listened to, etc. every month. And if you're a patron, I will see you over there very shortly for the March roundup. And I'll also be putting up all my notes on Half His Age, on some interviews that I watched, on my kind of real-time notes for my reread of Half His Age. A little behind the scenes peek at how the sausage gets made. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye! Special shout out to Kelly T, Paula Boone, Icarus Moore, Mina Floyd, Eric Danielson, Cecilia D'Arvel, Euphoric, and my Sharpay Evans tier patrons.